The night before Munich this year, a Russian attack drone struck the sarcophagus covering the ruined fourth reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. And we see this as a deeply symbolic move by Russia, by Putin. Just recently in Ukraine, we discussed the crucial role of nuclear energy in keeping the country running despite Russia's constant.
A day after Putin targeted Chernobyl with an Iranian-made Shahed drone, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance delivered a scathing, destabilizing attack on European democracy at the annual Munich Security Conference, an address that could have been scripted by the Kremlin itself. Incredibly, Vance claimed that the true enemies were not China and Russia, the latter deeply involved in international drug trade, human trafficking, and a financier of terrorism. Vance made the wildly subversive statement coming mere hours after Russia committed a blatant act of nuclear terrorism, a drone strike on the Chernobyl sarcophagus, which nuclear experts warned could be one of the most dangerous attacks since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine nearly 3 years ago. Yet Vance chose to shift the blame. Instead of condemning Russia or China, he declared that the real threat came from within European democracy itself, parroting the very ideological subversion that enemies of the democratic free world, from Beijing to the Kremlin, actively promote. His speech echoed authoritarian tactics. As one editorialist observed, Vance deployed a trick populists and authoritarians have used for years: accuse others of exactly everything that you do yourself. But before we dive in, if you enjoy this video and want to support the channel, don't forget to click the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. Your support means a lot, and it also helps promote these progressive messages to the YouTube algorithm, which helps its amplification to reach even more viewers. This year's Munich Security Conference has been rife with hypocrisy and calculated efforts to destabilize the world order, paving the way for Beijing and Moscow to supplant America as global leaders. As Putin continues his indiscriminate slaughter of Ukrainians, including women and children, the Trump-Vance administration has emerged as the chief betrayer of American leadership. Despite campaign promises to end the war, they are actively enabling the Kremlin's aggression, escalating conflict in Europe while deliberately sidelining Ukrainian President Zelensky from peace negotiations. President Volodymyr Zelensky also took the stage at the Munich Security Conference with a stark warning. Putin is not seeking peace but preparing for further escalation. Zelensky declared, quote, "Russia is creating 15 new divisions, adding up to 150,000 soldiers, more than the armies of European countries," end quote. He warned that as Putin strengthens his military for another invasion in Europe, the Western world faces a moment of truth. And yet, astonishingly, Vice President Vance parroted Kremlin propaganda, effectively siding with Russia and abandoning America's European and Ukrainian allies. Their stance undermines decades of U.S. leadership and sacrifices made in defense of freedom and democracy.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
So Europe gets invaded by Russia, and the vice president of the Trump administration, J.D. Vance, says to Europe at the annual Munich Security Conference that the actual threat is not the invaders who are raping and murdering Ukrainian women and children in European and Ukrainian territories like Bucha, but instead the actual threat is Europe itself because of wokeness. Victim blaming while also forsaking the European alliance 400,000 some American veterans died fighting for. The Trump-Vance administration is shaping up to not only be hypocrites to ending wars, but also victim blaming abusers and excusers of fascist invaders. Bravo, MAGA! You're true patriots. Vance's statements even made the chairman of the Munich Security Conference break down into tears after the vice president's destabilizing speech that effectively abandoned America's European allies to fend for themselves against the amassing Russian army.
With Ewald von Kleist, this conference started as a transatlantic conference. After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. No one did this better than President Zelensky. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
This hypocrisy could not be clearer. While Russia wages war crimes and violates international law, the Trump administration's highest voices rail against European democracies for defending their values. They claim to uphold free speech but ally themselves with regimes that suppress it. They speak of sovereignty but ignore the sovereignty of Ukraine. They speak of shared values but align with those who mock them. As Putin prepares his forces for renewed aggression, America under Trump and Vance turns its back on its allies, isolating itself from the values it claims to champion. It is a betrayal not only of Europe, but of the principles that have defined American leadership on the global stage. America could not have secured its independence from its former tyranny of Great Britain without the unwavering support of its transatlantic ally, France, just as Ukraine cannot achieve its own freedom from the tyrannical Putin regime without the steadfast backing of its European allies and American transatlantic ally in the fight for liberty. Forsaking Ukraine in their fight for liberty forsakes our own American values, yet as Trump and Vance align with the authoritarian regimes in Beijing and Moscow and enable Russia's war machine in its brutal attempt to erase Ukraine from the map, an echo of Stalin's Soviet oppression, the call for solidarity grows louder. Now is the time for freedom fighters across the world to unite and stand with Ukraine against tyranny. So if you care about liberty and defeating tyranny, let's call out the hypocrites and always remember to stay vigilant, fellow freedom fighters.